Лани Минелла – американская актриса с редким четырехоктавным голосом, который позволяет ей работать в по-настоящему широком диапазоне и использовать самые разные тембры и образы.
We all start out as babies.
And then as days go by, we're getting a little older and we're told we shouldn't cry. We go to school and trying to be cool. And then we graduate. Some of us might be mommies, others work, or even date. As we grow old, we wonder, were we smart or just a fool? Now some of us are back in diapers again, and others even drool.
Именно благодаря этому в ее портфолио более 500 проектов. Мультфильмы, видеоигры, реклама и многое другое. Причем нередко в рамках одного и того же тайтла она озвучивает сразу нескольких персонажей, зачастую совершенно не похожих друг на друга. Хороший пример Hearthstone.
I am not a morning person.
I'm not lonely anymore. Blood is my currency.
Но этим ее вклад не ограничивается. Лани – основатель и владелец актерского агентства Audio Gods, через которое подбирают актеров для озвучки. Поэтому ее влияние на индустрию выходит далеко за рамки собственных ролей и фактически не поддается точной оценке. Например, именно она порекомендовала Джона Сент-Джона на роль Дюка Нюкема.
I'm Duke Nukem. Who wants some?
Nobody steals our chicks and lives, eat shit and die.
Shake it, baby. You wanna dance?
Your face, your ass, what's the difference? Hail to the king, baby.
Всем привет! С вами Улетный Гусь. И честно говоря, ее талант стал для меня настоящим открытием. Если, скажем, голос любого другого актера обычно можно легко узнать с первых секунд, то голос Лани Минеллы зачастую практически невозможно идентифицировать. Она подарила голос таким персонажам, как Нэнси Дрю, Руж the Bat в Sonic the Hedgehog, а также множество героев из Elder Scrolls V, Skyrim, например, Матерь Ночи.
Oh, Cicero, dear Cicero, such a humble servant, but he will never hear my voice, for he is not a listener.
Полный список ее работ можно без труда найти в интернете. Перечислять его здесь можно очень долго. Я даже удивился, узнав, что она озвучила зараженных The Last of Us. А также некроморфов в ремейке Dead Space. Согласитесь, вряд ли кто-то догадается, что за этими жуткими звуками стоит женщина. Забавно, что о Лани Минелли я узнал совершенно случайно. Раньше я особо не задумывался о том, кто именно озвучивает персонажей в играх. Листая Википедию по Babsy 3D, я обратил внимание, что все роли в игре озвучила одна актриса. Это показалось мне крайне необычным. Раньше я даже не допускал мысли, что такое вообще возможно. Хотя знал, что один актер может озвучивать сразу нескольких персонажей. Но чтобы вообще всех, это уже совсем другой уровень. Впрочем, допускаю, что в самой игре персонажей для озвучки могло быть не так уж и много. Подробно изучив страницу Лани на Википедии, я понял, что она по-настоящему удивительный человек. Мне захотелось связаться с ней и взять небольшое интервью, чтобы узнать, как ей удается справляться с таким объемом работы и как в целом устроен процесс озвучки видеоигр изнутри. Честно говоря, я даже представить не мог, что действующая актриса согласится дать мне интервью. Что я могу сказать о ней? Лани Минелла очень открытый и жизнерадостный человек, который до сих пор активно работает в индустрии видеоигр и участвует в проектах таких гигантов, как Sony, Microsoft, Nintendo и других крупных компаний. Ее речь прекрасно поставлена, профессиональное ремесло дает о себе знать, поэтому мне практически не пришлось ничего редактировать. Коротко о самом интервью. Лани очень занятый человек. Из-за плотного графика ей буквально приходилось разрываться между записями, поэтому она прислала мне аудиоответы на мои вопросы. Они были записаны и переданы еще в сентябре прошлого года, но, к сожалению, руки до них дошли только сейчас. Я постаралась смонтировать все так, чтобы это выглядело как полноценное живое интервью. Я задаю вопросы, а она на них отвечает. Во время ее ответов на фоне будут показаны игры, в озвучке которых она принимала участие. Перечислять конкретные роли в каждой игре я не буду. Во-первых, можно случайно что-то упустить, а во-вторых, их порой бывает настолько много в рамках одного проекта, что всю эту информацию попросту невозможно нормально уместить на экране. Впрочем, не исключаю, что местами могут быть вставлены другие видеофрагменты, если они будут лучше подходить по контексту. Я долго думал, как визуализировать речь Лани, так, чтобы это не выглядело просто закадровым голосом. Было несколько вариантов. Либо аккуратная звуковая вейвформа рядом со статичной фотографией, фотографий, либо решение с нейросетью оживить один из ее снимков, чтобы она буквально говорила с нами, как персонаж компьютерной игры, создавая эффект живого общения, примерно как это реализовано в XCOM 2. В итоге совсем скоро вы сами увидите, какой из подходов я выбрал. А может, в процессе у меня родилась третья идея, именно ее я в итоге реализовал. Что ж, давайте перейдем к интервью. Не забудьте включить субтитры, я подготовил их специально для вас. Если заметите неточности в переводе, обязательно пишите об этом в комментариях, я все исправлю. Иногда Ланя говорит довольно быстро, из-за чего может быть сложно успевать читать субтитры, поэтому не стесняйтесь поэкспериментировать со скоростью воспроизведения в плеере. Ланя, здравствуй. Очень приятно видеть тебя у себя в гостях.
Well, thank you for having me, Ilya, and I am thrilled to be on your channel.
Мне очень приятно это слышать. Я был искренне рад, когда вы ответили и согласились на интервью. Спасибо, что нашли время. Ну что ж, давайте перейдем к вопросам. Расскажите немного о себе. Когда вы впервые обнаружили в себе этот талант и как пришли в игровую индустрию?
It all began with me doing morning drive radio, and I was doing characters like Joan Rivers, Katharine Hepburn, Zsa Zsa Gabor, and Dr. Ruth Westheimer as guests. But then someone heard me and brought me up to do voices for a presentation to pitch the Laserdisc to Motorola and Philips, I think. And they wanted me to do voices from a Fern Gully movie. After that, they sent me downstairs to their children's department, and they did CD-ROMs. I didn't even know what a CD-ROM was. But I asked, who else does this kind of thing? And they shrugged and said, oh, you should go to the Consumer Electronics Show in Vegas, which I did for 2 years. I also went to the Game Developer Conference for 2 years, and about 13 years of Electronic Entertainment Expos. While at one of these, I asked someone that was demonstrating their game who did the voice casting. They said, I don't know. But someone behind me said, I do voices too. And that made me think I should provide a one-stop shop for casting, directing, and everything to make the voice part easy for clients and get the best talent pool around the world. I don't take any percentage from the talent like an agent does, but I started Audio Gods in 1992 to provide that service. I don't ever just cast myself either. I'm here to compete with everyone else and give the best bang for the buck, as they say.
Насколько я понимаю, попытки находить проекты через выставки оказались не слишком эффективными. Именно это в итоге и подвигло вас к созданию собственного агентства по озвучке.
I really wasn't that efficient when attending these trade shows. I would bring my cassettes, believe it or not, and a flyer, and on the back would be some of the titles that I did. Now there are way too many to put on the back of a flyer. And I would go up to people, and most of the things you enter and encounter are booths that have booth babes or people that are demonstrating a game. They are not the people you really want to contact, you know, for casting and acting and directing and all that kind of thing. So I would say, no, we got one job with Joe Wood, who was a publisher, and that was it for all those times that I was up there.
Значит, я правильно уловил ход событий. Тогда не могу не спросить. Audio Gods – довольно яркое и запоминающееся название. Стоит ли за этим названием какая-то история?
How did I come up with Audio Gods? Is I wanted to be at the beginning of the alphabet in terms of a search, if anyone was searching for audio. And I kind of thought, like, you know, Master Creator, Gods, but I didn't want to be too presumptuous, so I replaced the S with a Z. So, yeah, Master Creator. We create masterful things. We have a lot of experience because simply I've been in the business way too long. But I'm glad I am.
Вы упоминали, что на радио изображали голоса различных реальных людей. А в жизни доводилось использовать этот талант? Например, ради шутки или в каких-то ситуациях, где это могло сыграть вам на руку? Ну, условно, ответить на звонок из школы голосом родителей.
Well, since I had to do a little bit of the prank calls on the radio, I don't like doing that. I don't like pulling pranks on people, but they would make up stuff as entertainment on the radio. But one time, there was a local news station in San Diego looking for a co-host for a morning show. And I kept calling as myself, and they wouldn't take my calls, so I called in as Joan Rivers. They were so excited, but I came clean during the call because I don't like lying to anybody, and this backfired when they met with me, and they gave me like 1 minute and then showed me the exit.
Согласно информации из открытых источников, у вас довольно редкий 4-октавный диапазон голоса, который позволяет вам имитировать практически любые голоса. Насколько это действительно редкое явление в индустрии, и встречались ли вам другие актеры озвучки с похожими возможностями?
Now, the 4-octave range, I don't know that I have encountered too many, especially with females. I suppose there might be some trans people that could stretch their range that far. It is rather rare.
Как вы относитесь к той известности, которую принес вам ваш талант? Часто ли вас или ваш голос узнают в повседневной жизни? Например, «Мама, смотри, я слышала голос этой тети в твоем навигаторе». Ведь некоторые актеры не всегда довольны своей популярностью. Например, Роуэн Эткинсон, сыгравший мистера Бина. Понимаю, что масштабы разные, но интересно, испытываете ли вы что-то подобное?
Well, one thing I am not is an egotist. I'm pretty humble. And I had someone mention they heard me in a photo booth. Now, select your favorite graphic theme. Use those up and down buttons to highlight your theme. And then press OK when you're finished.
That's definitely Nancy Drew.
That was a cheap job many years ago. I don't even remember who the client was. But you know, there are still some of these photo booths where you put your quarter in, or now it's probably a credit card, and you sit there and they'll probably give you directions like, look at the camera and smile. So I think that when people have come up to my autograph signings, I've only done 3, they are surprised when they even look at my banner and say, oh my gosh, I didn't know you did Sindel or Lucas or something like that. They probably came because I'm Rouge the Bat, and I was also the casting director and director for 5 of those games.
You are pathetic and weak. For the Shokan!
I'm Rouge the Bat, but you can call me Rouge. Bad day or what? Well, believe what you want to believe.
I don't stop to kind of analyze my fame, so to speak. I'm very, very happy to have done as much as I have, and just recently, I guess, I am receiving the honor of being in the Guinness Book of World Records for being the most prolific female voice actor in video games. Yay!
Ничего себе, поздравляю, это очень серьезное достижение. Наверняка у вас много фанатов. Вам нравится общаться с ними? Или вы все же предпочитаете держать дистанцию?
I love my fans, and there have just been a few that turned into stalkers or something strange. And I do get letters and some texts. So I try to be nice and answer what I can and do autographs or record little bits for people's birthdays or weddings or graduations when they contact me. I don't charge for that. But one of the advantages of being a voice actor as opposed to something on the screen, TV or movies, whatever, is that you don't get recognized physically. So you don't have a bunch of paparazzi hanging around you.
Можете ли вы объяснить для меня и моих зрителей, которые далеки от ремесла озвучки, как вы и ваши коллеги настраиваетесь на нужный голос? Это похоже на то, будто у вас внутри есть тумблер частот, а вы просто переключаетесь на нужную волну.
Part of being a good voice actor is having voice control, and that takes experience or, miracles. You have to use your muscles, your tongue, and your body to achieve the instrument, whether you're being a violin, a cello, or double bass. You can add texture when you add air to the voice, or when you flap your vocal cords. And that can wreck your voice quicker than just the screaming deaths.
Изучая проекты, над которыми вы работали, я заметил, что нередко вы озвучивали сразу нескольких персонажей. Например, в Babsy 3D вы озвучивали всех героев. Как быстро вам удается переключаться между разными голосами? Нужно ли вам иногда переслушивать прошлые записи, чтобы снова точно попасть в нужный тембр, например, на следующий день?
If I do a repeat part, yeah, references help. I get right into the voice. I only need a couple words, or one sentence. And yes, I can switch back and forth between many voices without falling out of character.
Вы подарили голос огромному количеству персонажей, поэтому у меня возникает вопрос, насколько хорошо вы помните свои роли? Если к вам подойти и назвать имя персонажа, которого вы озвучивали, какова вероятность, что вы сразу вспомните его голос и сможете его воспроизвести?
There are a few standouts that can come easily to me, like Nancy Drew. Hi, I'm Nancy Drew. Yes, I've managed to narrow down that the treasure is related to the ship somehow, but beyond that, I haven't figured out the specifics. Bugsy, that voice.
You have killed 3 of the chosen, taken their hearts. Disturbing. Is that why you have come? To slay the final Tower Guardian? To take my heart?
But sometimes people bring up something like way back from Illbleed or Blue Stinger, and I can't remember it without going to YouTube, finding it, or having them send me a reference.
Мне всегда было интересно, почему студии готовы переплачивать за участие известных актеров озвучки. Например, когда персонажа озвучивает кинозвезда, чей гонорар, очевидно, довольно высок. Это действительно влияет на продажи и окупается? Или это скорее имиджевое решение? Вспоминается пример с True Crime 2, где в проект привлекли множество звезд, но в итоге он так и не окупился.
Ah, yes, the celebrity factor. Most of the time, the extra fee does not pay off. If that actor or actress goes on a talk show and talks about the game, that's great advertising and brings attention to it. But when so many of the games are free to download and they only make money off of microtransactions, it's not that easy to justify paying one actor tens of thousands of dollars. Plus, this means usually paying everyone through the SAG-AFTRA union, which can double the expense expense for the client, or maybe they want triple scale or whatever. It involves paying all the extra state federal taxes, the Social Security, the health and retirement, and you have to use a union authorized payroll company that charges at least 15% or more of the whole total. So yeah, the celebrity thing plus many celebrities, they might be prima donnas, they might not. And there's a whole different methodology when you are voice acting versus acting on screen. When you're being on screen, you don't want to have the Jim Carrey over exaggerated look. But when you're doing voice acting, you need to use your whole body. Get away from her, you bitch! You know, I mean, you have to really use more gestures than you would on screen. Otherwise, they would say, ooh, if you're doing that on screen, you're way too exaggerated. So yeah, I'd say there's a lot of celebrities that are maybe screen actors, and they may not be the best at just voice acting, especially for a game. Most games today don't have cutscenes, so they might not know any kind of context or what have you and be like a fish out of water.
Озвучка может записываться как в совместных сессиях, когда актеры работают друг с другом в одной студии, так и по отдельности, без прямого взаимодействия. Есть ли заметная разница в результате, которую может почувствовать обычный игрок? И какой из этих форматов сегодня используется чаще?
Most of the time you don't record ensemble, that's what they call it, with a group. There are very few cutscenes, as I said, where any actor is interacting with another. Usually the director, if there are reference or context files, we can deliver those to the actor, but there are seldom any times that we have them all together. I know that some animations, cartoons do ensemble because that is an entire long, so to speak, scene. There are no like separate things like call outs or, congratulations, you've just killed 40 knights, here's your reward. That doesn't happen in a cartoon. When you have an entire story, such as a cartoon, then you can benefit from ad-libs that are thrown out by different characters reacting to each other, etc., but it doesn't happen in games very often that you'd ever do ensemble.
Как правило, сегодня релизы игр выходят сразу на мировой рынок, а значит их необходимо переводить на разные языки. Если игра переводится на язык, отличный от оригинала, вы принимаете какое-то участие в этом процессе?
For the most part, we record the American USA version, and then the clients will send it to whatever localization companies they use for whatever languages that they're coming out with. And similarly, they may just use, text on screen in their language instead of recording it all over again. What we normally have done, let's say with Cryptic or Neverwinter, is that we will send the American files over to whatever localization company they were using. I didn't have any part to play in that. And then they would listen to us and try to match the best they could with whatever actors they were using in their language.
Хотелось бы также немного затронуть такую хайповую тему, как нейросети. Как вы относитесь к их влиянию на индустрию озвучки? На мой взгляд, это очень мощный инструмент, который может быть полезен как помощник, но вряд ли способен полноценно заменить живого актера. Интересно было бы услышать ваше мнение.
The dreaded AI. Yes, I have heard my voice used as an AI-generated character in a YouTube clip, and the person that created it apologized profusely when I asked them about it, but they did spend a lot of time trying to engineer the acting and make it sound good, and they weren't making any money off of it. I don't think AI can ever replace our acting ability in terms of emotion or timing, variability. I do think it's a threat when companies don't care. And of course, we will see more and more of AI being used. We just have to hope for the best.
Не могу не затронуть вопрос оплаты. Из чего складывается гонорар актера озвучки? Допустим, один актер озвучивает 4 роли, а другой одну, но при этом объем текста у них одинаковый. Как в таком случае распределяется оплата? Кто получает больше?
Ah, yes, the lovely pay question. Only in union jobs do we get paid by the number of characters we do. Non-union is usually just paid by the hour. And we do have, let's just say with union, there are additional session fees, like if your character repeats in the same game, if a game is not registered under a new title. Let's just say if you have Star Trek Online. Okay, that's a union job. And let's just say they come out with different releases, but they're not titled, and the game is just registered under Star Trek Online. If you had 8 appearances, even over several years, you would get paid an increase in an additional bonus. It would start with $75, then $150, then a little bit more. It doesn't keep going after a while, but that is paid in lieu of residuals, which normally you would get paid residuals, union, if you did it union, if you worked on a union movie, animated series, TV show, etc. So again, games aren't making money, as far as maybe in sales if they sell the individual copies of the game, but if they are free to download, they only make their money using microtransactions. So again, this is debatable, and we're trying to get more money for like dubbing and looping, things like that, but it is again a fluctuating thing. But union union it can be roughly one voice, 1 hour. Let's just call it $500, okay? And that does not include how much you'd have to pay a payroll company to include all the additional fees with that. Now, I try to get my non-union actors the same pay without going through all the extra union fees and health and retirement, etc. But some indie games will pay $250 an hour, $350 an hour, and that's for however many characters that we're doing.
Игры сегодня стали довольно масштабными, и мне интересно, сколько в среднем времени уходит на их озвучку. Не могли бы вы поделиться какой-нибудь ориентировочной метрикой, чтобы понять, сколько времени занимает озвучка игры, в зависимости от объема диалогов?
Line counts are, I usually figure if you have 10-word average in a sentence, I figure on 125 lines an hour, that would include directing and maybe a couple of other takes. But it's just different. With looping, it takes longer because you have to watch what you're going to loop over, do audio dialogue replacement, ADR, and then they play it and then they have to monkey around with it. So that could be an average of 40 to 60 lines an hour.
Сталкивались вы с проявлением сексизма в индустрии озвучки? Как вам кажется, насколько это распространенная проблема по сравнению с другими сферами? Например, в той же медицине до сих пор встречаются устаревшие представления о том, что некоторые направления исключительно мужские. Есть ли что-то подобное в вашей профессии?
I'm not really sure what you mean about in medicine. There are views that certain fields are male only. That's true of almost every field, really. It's still very much male dominated, but of course there are now today many female doctors and others in the medical field. But as far as every game, more characters are male than female. And especially in fighting games, one has to sound tougher no matter what your gender is. And many times it's who you know and who you schmooze with that gets you the work. It's like, again, monsters, I've been plenty of monsters. So it's not that you can't be a female, especially also you could be trans.
Many of us can sound masculine.
Or monstrous. You know, it just depends on the person. Yet, there's a lot of discrimination out there. Age discrimination, sex discrimination. And we just have to go with it because let's just say we're doing an audition. When we send our auditions to our agents, we don't even know if that agent is going to forward that audition to the client. So again, there's a lot of hurdles and gates that we have to go through as voice talents.
Насколько профессия актера озвучки в целом считается высокооплачиваемой? И как вы считаете, насколько справедливо оценивается эта работа по сравнению с другими творческими профессиями?
Let me go back to union work because scale, meaning the minimum, is twice the pay for the amount of time spent. You do voice acting as it is when you're on camera. This is because when you're on camera, you spend a lot of wasted time while they do lighting, you're getting made up. This has nothing to do with the millions of celebrities that get paid for movies because that's way over scale. But again, the time doing a voiceover is far less than the other genres of acting. You just hit the mic running, boom. Sometimes you don't even see the script until right before you go on the mic and you have to make up a character instantly and be ready to roll.
Насколько я понимаю, в играх актерам озвучки иногда приходится работать с более откровенными или интимными сценами. Отличается ли такой процесс от обычной записи? И бывают ли случаи, когда актеры отказываются от подобной работы по личным причинам, и тогда их заменяют?
I don't think most of us have experienced intimate scenes in games. I have not heard of any. I don't know of any colleagues that do, I would say, X-rated porn or anything like that. So I don't have any experience in that, and I don't think it relates to people that are doing even R or M rated games, because that usually involves more swearing than it does intimate scenes.
Вы сами играете в видеоигры? И бывает ли, что запускаете проекты, над которыми работали?
I really don't have that much extra time to play games. I did play StarCraft. Lots of cheat codes. Didn't save anything. So when I went to deposit the Zerg Queen's cocoon into the enemy HQ, I had blown up the HQ and everything else. I did play one Nancy Drew game all the way through. And I'm not really into games that are not that intuitive, like how to get out of the level onto the next level or use the inventory. Thus, I have tried a few and watched many walkthroughs, but I don't have any consoles or the time needed to assign buttons.
За годы работы у вас наверняка появились как любимые, так и менее любимые проекты. Могли бы рассказать о них?
I treat every game with equal respect. And again, we don't have any idea what the game is about when we work on them. As far as scripts, I love the good ones. They can be rare. Blood 2 had some great zingers. And I helped write some of the annoyance factor lines, like in Unreal Tournament and StarCraft. Those are when you just keep hitting the character and they get annoyed and they will say, in the event of a water landing, you too can be used as a flotation device. If you're going to hurl chunks, use the vomit bag in front of you.
In case of a water landing, you may be used as a flotation device. To hurl chunks, please use the vomit bag in front of you.
One of the best written scripts I came across for a very little known game was Tony Tough and the Night of the Roasted Moths. From what I know, well if you can bypass the dialogue in games and just read the text really quickly. A lot of gamers do that. So we learn that we have to tend to be fast on our delivery so we don't languish and irritate the players. Being too slow.
Вот это интересно. Я даже не думал о том, что возможность пропускать диалоги влияет на то, как актеры выстраивают темп речи. Какую из своих ролей вы считаете самой удачной? И есть ли наоборот роль, которая, на ваш взгляд, получилась не так хорошо? Почему?
That is an interesting question about what roles I consider my best. I don't know, because best depends so much on the script. You can only make so much gold out of doo-doo. You know what I mean? So once we do our job, we just move on to the next one. We really don't have the ability to follow what's happening with the game that goes on behind our scenes. We're here, we're gone. And we don't even know sometimes when it's going to get released. It can take years sometimes. And we don't have a way to follow sales, really, to determine success. So that's a hard one to answer. Yes, I know. You meant a role in which I gave my absolute best. Well, we always give our best. And again, to fully showcase our acting skills, I'll give you an example. Suppose I did 3 takes, and I did them all differently. And this happens to me quite frequently. I've been told, we can't make up our mind. We like all 3, blah, blah, blah. So it really is dependent not only on the script, because again, see, spot, run, how much can you do? But on the people that are listening and making those choices. Sometimes they want a choice that is really laid back, pull back. That could be due because everyone else was not as animated per se as you were, you know? So we have to be a common denominator level of projection or acting or emoting as whatever else they recorded, and we won't know that.
Вы уже довольно давно в индустрии. Приходилось ли вам сталкиваться с профессиональным выгоранием?
The old burnout. Oh, yes. I think there are always, you have good days, you have bad days, but we always have to be ready to do that audition right away, even if we don't feel like it, because there are so few chances, so few opportunities. We have to give it whatever we can, whenever it's asked for. And that's the difference, too, about if you have a regular job, let's say in retail, you know you're going to work from 9 to 5. You're getting paid X amount. But in voice work, so many of us cannot depend just on our voice acting income to survive. You usually have to have another job or something else. So again, burnout, we have to continually do auditions that we don't hear anything back for. So if we took it personally, we could burn out and go, oh, I give up. But you can't. Not if you want to stay in this business. That just can't happen.
Нет ли у вас ощущения, что ранние проекты были более смелыми и интересными, а новые стали осторожнее и местами более пресными, как будто они боятся показать зубы, чтобы никого не обидеть?
I know what you mean about people trying to play it more safe or more bland, forgetting to show their teeth. You're right. Because people are afraid of being sued or offending anyone or being accused of discrimination. That's why when we see auditions coming to us, it will say open to all genders and ethnicities. Or on the other side of the fence, we will see must be actually African American or must be actually Hispanic or Asian or whatever. In my opinion, people should be hired on the basis of their talent. Yes, everyone should get the opportunity and be allowed to, have whatever auditions that they feel suited for, but that doesn't always happen. Again, I don't think we're going to be submitted if we are not black, for example, for a black part. That used to be different. And I have done African-American voices for like Civil War characters for museum kiosks. And I know, again, the African-American people are allowed to do Caucasian parts. All is well and good. But yes, that's the way that we stand today, that people are more careful about submitting the actual correct DNA, so to speak, or ethnicity or gender. But yeah, it's different though. You can be bi and you can be trans and do whatever gender. That's allowed.
Наверняка вы сталкивались с людьми, с которыми сложно работать в вашей профессии. Как это обычно проявляется?
When you are talking about difficult people to work with, it's usually if they don't follow direction or maybe they can't. Saying they don't want a line read. When I say something the way that it should be said, being a prima donna, or saying they don't want to continue because it might hurt their voice, or not sticking to the schedule that they said that they were fine with.
А вы сами когда-нибудь отказывались от работы?
No, I've never declined a job unless it was for a political reason. I don't tend to do political things. Working with other people, as I mentioned before, we don't often do ensemble recording. But there are some actors that after giving them many chances, because of one thing or another, I tend not to go back to them. But I give people a lot of opportunities voice, even if they've messed up a few times. By messing up, I don't chastise someone if they haven't read their script. I will have to say, okay, let's take a minute, and can you read it ahead of time? They should have done their homework. But that's not uncommon. I prefer the actors that do go over the script before, and we can go moving the session along, without stopping and starting so much. As far as the prima donna attitude, as I said before, or the ones that, again, will say, oh yeah, you take a job, but then no, now you won't, either because of scheduling or because you now have presumed that it's going to hurt your voice. You always leave the exertions to the end anyway. And I know when I'm directing, I sometimes do those exertions just like I want them to do. So I'm actually having to do it longer per day and wreck my own voice. But if you don't want the chance of wrecking your voice for a day or so, don't get in the game industry, VO business.
Иногда кажется, что один и тот же актер в разных играх звучит совершенно по-разному. Где-то он полностью погружается в роль, а где-то создается впечатление, что он просто зачитывает текст. Как вы думаете, в таких случаях виноват сам актер или все же режиссер, который недостаточно хорошо с ним работал?
As I always say, the script is where it starts. You really can't do much with a lousy script. Sometimes we actually rewrite parts of the script and we will say, can I make a contraction out of cannot, like can't, or we offer some suggestions to make it better. But it really is more of the job of the scriptwriter, the director, then the actor has the responsibility, but it's a collaborative effort. If everyone does their job well and tries to work together cooperatively as a team and is willing to take suggestions and can make those suggestions come to fruition, such as if the director says, can you add more texture to the voice? And then if the talent is capable of doing that, then great. So a matter of change-ups, not just reading everything, da-da-da-da-da-da, you can just say something and maybe do that. You can ask the client, can I add something, like the little emotes ahead of time? Like if the line says, I don't know, can we add, I don't know? And usually they're okay with it. That makes a better result sometimes.
Актеры перед записью реплик обычно готовятся дома, читают текст, репетируют роль, или сегодня это уже не так важно, и многие предпочитают входить в образ прямо в студии. Как поступаете вы?
Most of the time we don't get the script with much advance notice. Many times I've recorded right after being handed the script. In the case of looping the creature and monsters to horror movies, you are shown the scene once and then asked to create, act, and match the timing to the action, but we don't know anything about the game or the movie, no plot, no outcome. We usually have to ask, how loud are we supposed to speak? Are we over a comm, in stealth mode, or in battle? Or are we just talking to the player? And if that's the case, how far away are we? So the amount of projection, we have to ask that. And sometimes the client doesn't even know the answer. So they'll ask, give it to us many ways, far away, project a lot, or do it in stealth mode. Yeah, that happens a bit here and there.
В кино пробы часто показывают как процесс, где актеры стоят с листочками, волнуются, репетируют, затем заходят в комнату, читают роль и сразу получают результат. Насколько это соответствует реальности? Или сегодня кастинг чаще проходит удаленно?
Yeah, those days of people standing in a crowd with papers and rehearsing their lines, going into a room, no, that doesn't happen anymore. We get auditions over email, we record at our own home studio and send them in, often with an immediate or very quick turnaround. Then it's up to our agents again if they even send our auditions to the client. We don't know if the client ever hears us.
Меня удивило, что вы озвучивали Щелкунов в The Last of Us и Некроморфа в Dead Space. Действительно ли для таких ролей нужен актер вашего уровня? Разве нельзя было взять менее опытного исполнителя и просто наложить эффекты? Или на самом деле все гораздо сложнее, чем может показаться со стороны? Вау, звучит практически точь-в-точь, как в игре. Удивительно, что вы можете добиться такого звучания без каких-либо спецэффектов.
When I did the first Last of Us, I was the infected, and later after I did that on the way home, they said you're going to be hired for the bloater, the end boss. And that's when they said we were imagining a sea mammal like a seal having sex. Oh my goodness, that was the weirdest direction. But you had to do it kind of when the infected was shown to me, you had to do it to picture. And they had like a line drawing for about 2 minutes long of somebody that was like crawling and then being hit back and the head hits the back. back and the wall or something, and then they would throw up or be writhing in agony.
Блин, не думал, что у озвучки этого зараженного такая забавная история.
And then when The Last of Us 2 came out, I was the clicker, and again, we were shown things. We were shown the clicker running, and maybe like looking around. And people have to have good chops and be able to control their voice quite well to be able to control the air and the clicking and the acting and to timing. So no, I think that's not amateur hour.
Если актер записал реплики, становится ли компания их полным владельцем? Или актер может рассчитывать на какие-то отчисления, если они используются в других проектах?
Yes, the client does own our voices outright and cannot really use it ethically in another project or game. If it was a new title, non-union probably they could get away with that if we don't know, because oftentimes we won't know, like that AI generated stuff that was done to that client I mentioned on YouTube of my voice. I didn't know, but he tagged me. That's how I found out. So not usable in other projects, that's usually ethical. You don't use our stuff in something that we weren't paid for. You should always ask, find out. You don't want to tick anybody off. And we want to be compensated fairly. So it's always good to kind of have those arrangements ahead of time. Overseas, they used to have buyouts for games, pay an extra $100 or whatever it was for buyouts. In commercials, I've seen buyouts, to use this stuff for so many weeks. That's, again, more common in union games or union commercials than not. But otherwise, no, it's not ethically or sound business to reuse something in an unrelated title or project.
Часто ли бывают ситуации, когда нужно дозаписать реплики? Например, если в сюжете произошли изменения. Проходит ли это в том же формате, что и основная запись? Или бывают случаи, когда вы просто записываете несколько строк дома и отправляете заказчику, и этого оказывается достаточно?
Most commonly, we don't see a lot of pickups or changes. Some of us are nice enough to do them for free and just send them over, and that was enough. But we don't see total change-ups anymore because people pretty much don't give us the stuff till the very last minute. We are the last hair on the tail that wags the dog.
Если верить Википедии, именно вы порекомендовали Джона Сент-Джона на роль Дюка Нюкема. Могли бы вы вспомнить еще каких-нибудь персонажей, которые обрели свой голос благодаря вашим рекомендациям, не считая тех, которых вы сами озвучивали?
Because I've done over 500 titles and cast them with so many different talents, they can thank me for getting them where they are, but I'm not going to name names because there are just way too many people. There are a lot of great people that I have in my talent pool, and I'm so fortunate to work with them, and I hope to continue to work with them and add more people that are multiply voiced and good actors, because voice acting is so much different than acting for on-screen.
В The Elder Scrolls IV Oblivion есть известный момент, когда NPC запинается во время реплики и просит еще один дубль, и этот неудачный дубль в итоге остался в игре.
Go ahead, please. I heard that thieves broke into the Arcane University, the Imperial Legion compound, and the temple all on the same night. Wait a minute, let me do that one again. I heard that thieves broke into the Arcane University, the Imperial Legion compound, and the temple all on the same night.
Бывали ли у вас похожие случаи, когда какие-то неожиданные моменты попадали в финальную версию?
Yes, I remember in Duke Nukem where we had some interesting takes that ended up, if you spent the first 2 minutes actually letting the music and everything go over the credits, you could hear an orgasmic scene with me and John.
Ooh, Laura, is that you?
You're so big.
And then they took a line from getting poison gas in a mine, and there was the climax. And then John said, "Oh, that smells like fish." There was also that "all your base are belong to us" famous line. That usually comes from bad translation to English, and it came from a 1992 Sega Mega Drive release of the Japanese video game called Zero Wing. I think those are funny. But of course, we don't know what ends up in the game unless we play it. And even then, depending on where you are and what level and what you do, that would affect what comes out, maybe as an Easter egg. And I love Easter eggs and think there should be more of them in games. Or what you call the annoyance factor, when you keep clicking on a character and finally it blurts out something funny. I think games would be a lot better with more humor and wit. Not everything funny, but just here and there. More witty scripts.
В последние годы все чаще появляется информация об отмененных проектах. Приходилось ли вам работать над играми, которые в итоге так и не вышли? Есть ли у вас какая-то личная статистика несколько таких случаев. И можно ли сказать, что в последние годы эта тенденция усилилась?
When Embracer Group bought a whole bunch of companies thinking they were going to get a large investment, I think from someone in Saudi Arabia, they ended up having to cancel projects and close down a lot of developers. So that was very unfortunate, and it's still hurting people and probably Embracer to this day. But once we do our job, we are pretty clueless as to what happens with the game. We don't know. All we know is that we're not supposed to talk about the game that we worked on unless it's released. So I suppose we have to go Googling release date of, and there are many that I can't even mention that are on a list that I have to keep searching to see if that game ever did get released. And yes, there are a few that have no follow-up, no history. Where did you go? It's a mystery.
Я где-то читал или слышал, что при записи озвучки для Battlefield 1 актера заставляли кидать муляжи гранат для большей реалистичности. Бывали ли у вас похожие необычные случаи во время записи?
Good grief, having to throw a dummy grenade? No, you can go through the action of like with your arm as though you are throwing something, but you don't have to have the actual dummy piece of merch to do that. We really have to use our bodies a lot to add motion to our voice, and it's important for an actor to know how to physically incorporate your motion into your voice. Some people are not very good at it. They may do a motion and then do the voice and not go when they're doing that motion. So it's very important to be able to add physicality, put some motion in the ocean, so to speak.
Вы настоящий ветеран индустрии озвучки. И уверен, за это время у вас накопилось немало забавных и неожиданных историй. Не могли бы вы поделиться хотя бы одной?
To be honest, as I said before talking about what they were looking for to do the bloater for Last of Us, a seal having sex, and I told them, you know, I've watched enough Nat Geo Wild and documentaries to know that seals usually only make noise when the male seals are fighting over their harem. They don't have climactic sex scenes, so I just had to make that up. Anyway, that was one of the weirdest things. And also when I gesture, sometimes I've knocked over my soda at least twice. And, you know, I think I recall doing a deep dinosaur voice for a certain card game where they would pitch the voice down an octave without preserving the time. So this would slow everything down. And they kept asking me to do it quicker, when if they just used time preservation, that wouldn't have been a problem. So those are little challenges. And there have been some scripts with so many grammatical errors that you have to correct on the spot. And it doesn't hurt to have an English degree, which I have. But otherwise, as far as remembering things, oh boy, it becomes a blur after so many years.
Вы работали над некоторыми играми серии Duke Nukem, где главный герой известен довольно провокационным и местами сексистским юмором. Сегодня, как мне кажется, такие проекты наверняка бы вызвали серьезные споры.
Shake it, baby. You wanna dance?
Оглядываясь назад, испытываете ли вы какие-то смешанные чувства по поводу участия в таком проекте? И согласились бы вы поучаствовать в подобной игре, если бы представилась возможность сейчас?
I have a great sense of humor. Love to have fun. I don't have problems with swearing or joking around, but I won't do porn or political projects if they go against my beliefs.
Считаете ли вы, что искусство и творчество стоят выше подобных ограничений? Что они могут провоцировать, шокировать, заставлять задуматься? И это нормально, если все остается в разумных пределах.
I'm an art minor, and you know, everything is so subjective. Like, what is creative? What is good art? I don't think it's good art to duct tape a banana to a canvas, and they called it Comedian, and it sold for $6.2 million in 2024. That's ridiculous. There's just too much concern to be politically correct, and to insist that an actor be the correct, authentic ethnicity, or have the authentic British accent, for example. When no two British people approve of each other's accents, Brits can play Americans, but seldom is the reverse allowed. You just can't let it get to you. You have to just say next and move on.
Может быть, вы могли бы поделиться каким-нибудь максимально абстрактным инсайдом, без названий и конкретных деталей? Например, что скоро выйдет продолжение игры, которое давно ждут фанаты.
Danger, danger, Will Robinson. That comes from Lost in Space. We can't talk about anything that isn't officially released. I could say, hey, check out the new WoW trailer for Midnight. That game doesn't come out till 2026. Or I could say, we are working on the next Ready or Not release right now. That's all safe, but more than that, ooh. we gotta be careful.
И напоследок не могу не спросить. Изучая ваше портфолио, я заметил, что среди навыков указано кунг-фу. Довольно необычный пункт для такой профессии. Это действительно так или скорее своеобразная шутка?
I actually did do Shaolin Kung Fu for about a year with a very tough sensei who didn't give out the next belt levels without a good degree of proving your efficiency. And right now, I don't have that time to do extracurricular things like that. I was going 3 nights a week and also doing kickboxing at the same time.
Что ж, на этом мои вопросы закончились. Спасибо вам, Лани, что уделили мне время и согласились принять участие в интервью. Желаю вам творческих успехов. Было очень приятно с вами пообщаться. Всего вам хорошего.
Well, thank you so much for having me. I hope people continue to stay safe, have loads of fun, be more and more creative. Go ahead, be more daring, take chances. I love you all. Mwah.
В знак благодарности за то, что Лани уделила нам свое время, давайте поддержим ее и подпишемся на ее YouTube-канал. Не знаю, как вы, но лично я вынес из этого интервью много интересного. Например, стало очевидно, что американские актеры озвучки нередко работают в условиях, схожих с актерами локализации, зачастую не видя финального продукта. Из этого напрашивается вывод. Оригинальная озвучка не обязательно лучше из-за большего контекста, а скорее потому, что актеры и режиссер сильнее прорабатывают материал. Теперь мне было бы интересно взять интервью у отечественного актера, чтобы понять, насколько подходы к озвучке у американских коллег близки к нашим. Надеюсь, в будущем такая возможность появится. Если вам понравилось видео, не забудьте поддержать его лайком и подпиской. Это очень помогает развитию канала. Также буду рад вашим мнениям в комментариях. Заглядывайте в мой телеграм, где я делюсь мыслями и выкладываю мемы. А еще у меня есть предложка, где вы можете предлагать идеи для новых выпусков. Если вы хотите поддержать канал, информацию о том, как это сделать, можно найти в описании видео или на странице канала. С вами был Улетный Гусь. До скорых встреч!